Let's begin by meeting Mr. Vignarajah's supporters. We have former Chief Judge of Baltimore City, Wanda Hurd, longtime civil rights leader Marvin Doc Cheatham, former 5th District Council member Rikki Spector, former federal prosecutor Charlie Sheeler, and former Baltimore City police officer and FOP leader Robert Cherry. Our next supporter for Mr. Vignarajah is a former member of the Baltimore City Council, Rikki Spector, formerly represented Baltimore's 5th District. Ms. Spector, how are you? And thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I kept saying, well, I kept thinking we have one great woman that's supporting a terrific candidate for Baltimore City, and now you'll hear from another terrific supporter.
Yeah, well,
I was so impressed with what Judge Hurd shared that I hope that I get an opportunity also to respond in kind.
Well, she was impressed with you. I could hear as we were setting up our town hall tonight that she recognized your voice and was happy that you were part of this discussion. Why are you supporting Thuroo Vignarajah?
I need to tell you that after I retired, I served in the city council for nearly 40 years, a few months short, representing the 5th Councilmatic District. And after I retired, I had a visit from the African American community that knew me well. They were the city people, religious people, and the business people. And they said, Councilwoman, please help us get traction with City Hall. We can't vote with our feet. Please help us get traction. We need the eye in the sky back. The crime is ruining our lives, ruining our children. And I went back to City Hall, and I was astounded that I totally was ignored. I couldn't get to first base. I couldn't get to first base. And I felt so desperate because it was a no-brainer. A pilot program to the tune of $3 or $4 million paid for by a foundation for 6 months. If it would work and do the job tracking crime and getting convictions instead of that revolving door of 3% of the people doing all the shooting, doing all the killing, and right back out on the street in our neighborhoods. And I just was flabbergasted that I couldn't get support. If this works, if it would work, we would have a 3-year funded by the foundation in Texas to make sure that we clear this terrible, terrible problem from the Baltimore communities. Believe it or not, I didn't know Thuroo. He sought me out, explained to me that with his background, he could work with that consent decree, could work with the Justice Department, and holy of holies, do you know that last Friday, with his help, with getting it constitutionally correct and kosher, that is back up in the sky, and I hope that within a week or 2 or 3 weeks, we'll hear how effective it is, because as bad as it's been and all of the inconveniences of the quarantine that we're experiencing, it hasn't stopped the crime, it hasn't stopped the shootings, it's going on all the time. So I was so impressed that the value that Thuroo brought to me about making it acceptable to be brought back to Baltimore, that when the poll was done and the other candidates for mayor saw how favorable it was for the citizens of Baltimore, most of them are supporting the eye in the sky. Most of them are, and that's why the Board of Estimates a few weeks ago okayed it. And this is a no-brainer. There's not $1 of taxpayers' money, and yet it will be there for 6 months for a pilot with all the bells and whistles paid for us to test it as a pilot.
Spector, let me ask you a question. Well, no taxpayer money now, but I can imagine this company at some point is looking for a contract with the city. That'll be a discussion we'll have to have as well. According to, since you brought it up.
But that's 3 years. That's 3 years from now.
Okay, all right, but someone will want taxpayer dollars at some point to put that plane in the sky. They're not doing this out of just benevolence. We know that. Well, let's point out this, though.
Well,
Let me ask you this question.
with what's going on and the great problems that Baltimore has now, and people won't stay and people won't come,
right.
I would very much happy to see that in 3 years' time we have turned it around.
Right. Well, according to Act Now Baltimore, you were just talking about this, 74% of respondents say they don't trust the city's current elected officials. And after 39 years on the city council, you know the city's political landscape perhaps better than anyone. In fact, probably two of the longest serving people, you and Mary Pat Clark, who's announced that she, of course, is retiring herself. Why do you think Baltimoreans have so little faith in government right now?
Well, if you take a look at the crime, take a look at the schools, take a look at the tax situation, I mean, what does it take? And I need to tell you, it needn't be. The people of Baltimore deserve better. We really deserve better. And you know people when you live with them and when you work with them. I worked with the elected community of Baltimore City for almost 40 years. I can tell you that Theroux is the one. This is like a poker hand. You got to play the hand you're dealt. Of the candidates that we're able to support for mayor, he's head and shoulders above all others, and it's my pleasure and my honor and my obligation to get the people to understand that Theroux is the one.
Do you think the city is looking for an outsider, Ms. Spector?
What's an outsider mean? What does that mean?
Someone
an
who
insider,
hasn't,
an outsider?
Someone who
Don't
has
you
not
have to
run
be a
for elected
Baltimore City
office.
resident?
Someone who hasn't run for elected
Say that
office,
again?
and he certainly portrays himself that way. I'm not saying whether that's a good or bad thing, but that's been what he's been talking about.
Oh, you mean incumbent? You don't mean outsider. You mean
Well, I
an
mean someone
incumbent.
outside of the political elected landscape. That's what I mean. Someone who hasn't been elected to office before.
Well, I think that with his credentials and his ability to communicate to me and others how he understands the job and has remedies and plans for it, I think that he's just not an incumbent, but he's not an outsider.
And do you think that's what voters want right now?
I hope so. I'm doing my best to make them understand that he is the best candidate for the job.
So of all the other candidates...
I have
right.
a good experience.
Now, Ms. Spector, you were at our town hall in South Baltimore some months back, and of all the other candidates...
I wish that we had more, right.
Yeah, and by the way, we want to thank you for being there. Of all the other candidates who are running, you don't think any of the other candidates would make a good mayor for the city of Baltimore?
We only can have one mayor at a time, and this is the time that he is the one.
Okay, fair enough, I understand. Well, corruption and ethics are also top on the minds of voters, as you know. How do you think Mr. Vignarajah will handle these issues, specifically the crime issue and the corruption issue? Because these recently, obviously, with things that have happened at City Hall, have kind of gone hand in hand.
Yes, he's already shown me that he understands what we can do, add good tools to fix the crime problem. He's already done that. As far as the corruption is concerned, I have heard him and he has responded when it has become public about some of the... I don't know what these people were thinking. I was in City Hall for nearly 40 years, Ty. What were they thinking?
Ms. Spector, hang on there for a moment. Our researcher, Julian Barron, has some questions for you as well. He's been pouring through some clippings, and he has a few questions for you.
Councilwoman
Okay.
Spector, I know that towards the end of your career at City Hall, you had some notable disagreements with Jack Young, who was then the City Council president and is now, of course, the mayor of Baltimore. What do you think of the job Mayor Young has done to this point for the city of Baltimore during his mayoral tenure? And why is Mr. Vignarajah a better choice?
As far as Jack Young is concerned, before I retired, the Maryland Association had a marvelous event for me, called me the Grande Dame of Maryland. And Jack Young, then president of the City Council, came to that event, to the Mako Winter Conference, and publicly announced that he regretted what he did to me and would never do it again to another council person in his political life. I did not vote for two bills. I was the only council person at the time that didn't vote for two bills that Jack was supporting. And the reason I didn't was the law department had said both bills were illegal. I have been in city council long enough to know that illegal is not a sick bird. It's not legal. And that was the reason I did not support those two bills. After I didn't vote for them, Jack took me off of all the committees and also attempted to take me out of being the representative for the Planning Commission from the City Council. My son is an attorney, and he found that there had been a case in the mid-50s where a duly elected council person representing the Planning Commission for the City Council had also the president of the council had attempted to remove that person, and it was taken to court. And it was deemed that unless there was malfeasance, some illegal thing, a duly elected representative from the City Council to the Planning Commission could not be removed until the term was up. And that was why he took me off my committees, took me away from my leadership, but he couldn't remove me from the Planning Commission, and I stayed there until I retired.
And Ms. Spector, just really quickly, I want to ask, all of those things in mind, I know you said that Mayor Young apologized, but why do you think that Mr. Vignoraja will be a better choice for the city? Because, of course, Mayor Young is running for re-election.
I want to just tell you that I do know Jack, and I've worked with him for a long time. I did not know before I got involved with trying to make sure the city could take advantage of the opportunity for the eye in the sky. I did not know Mr. Vignoraja. He came and sought me out and said, let me work with the issues, the constitutionality of it, with the Justice Department, with the consent decree, with the police commissioner, with Jack Young. And I want you to know that just a few weeks ago, as presiding over as mayor, a member of the Board of Estimates, Jack Young, and the two votes that vote with him, the city solicitor and the Department of Public Works, the three of them voted to allow the MOU to happen so that the police commissioner could return the eye in the sky. Brandon voted against it, and the comptroller voted against it. But the three votes prevailed, and that's why it's back in the sky.
Thank you for your input, Ms.
And
Spector.
that was my introduction to Theroux, and that was a very good indication that the man can do the job. And that's very important. This is the most critical election. You know, as a city council person, when I came into the council,
Right.
Baltimore was such an important part of the state, it had a standalone election. It was my legislation that made us realize we keep getting the state. We don't get a good turnout for a municipal election.
We were
I
talking
was the
about
one
that,
that
yeah.
has it now running in the presidential. Baltimore City doesn't run in a standalone off-year election.
Right. Mrs. Spector, no, thank you very much. We appreciate that. Former Councilwoman Rikki Spector, we appreciate that. Julian, thank you.